Hello all. Today we are going to discuss how to revise and edit the formal report. Specifically, we are going to gain an understanding of how to revise the content of the formal report and discuss how to edit the formal report. In our last lecture, we discussed the formatting of the formal report and examined how the sourced topic sentence outline can help us construct paragraphs. In this lecture, we are going to begin our discussion of revision by reviewing the content that should be included in the prefatory material of the report. The formal report should begin with a title page. On this page, we will have the title of the report. This title should be center aligned and roughly in the middle of the page. It should also be no more than 12 words long. We will then have a double space, after which we will include your name. Finally, we will include the name of the hypothetical company for which you work. Additionally, at the top of the page, we will include a header. This header will provide the title of the report in all caps, and will then provide the page number. This header should be present on all the pages of the report. Once we have properly formatted our title page, we will then move on to the second page of the report, which is the letter or memo of transmittal. If we are writing a report for the company in which we work, we will write a memo of transmittal, as we see here. If we are writing a report for another company, we will create a letter of transmittal. The only difference between the two documents is the formatting. As far as the content of the transmittal document, we should provide similar information to what we included in the introduction of our informal report. Within the first paragraph, the author clearly identifies 1. Who requested the report, 2. The purpose of the report, and 3. Why the information of this report is important. By providing this information immediately within the transmittal document, the reader has the basic information he or she needs to understand the context of this report. This brings us to the second paragraph, which identifies the broad structure of the report. By including an outline of the main topics that we will discuss, we'll begin to establish a roadmap by which our reader can navigate the document. Remember, at this point, it is important that we only broadly indicate the report structure. Next, we will provide a fairly detailed discussion of where our research came from. Including this information helps to lend credibility to our findings by emphasizing the reliability of our sources. Finally, we will end with a closing that indicates our willingness to discuss the report further and that thanks the reader for his or her time. Remember that the letter or memo of transmittal should be no more than 1 page long. This brings us to the third page of the report, the table of contents. Within the table of contents, we should list the starting page for each section of the report, including headings and subheadings, beginning with the letter or memo of transmittal. Additionally, if you use any figures or charts, we should include them separately at the end of the table of contents. The next section of the report will be the executive summary. The executive summary provides a fairly comprehensive but brief overview of the report's content. Think of this as an abstract only in business format. After reading this document, the reader should know all the major arguments and recommendations of our report. Remember, it may be beneficial to have bullet points for each of the major sections within the executive summary. After each bullet point, mention the specific topic in bold and then provide a summary of that section's findings. When we have finished writing the executive summary, it should be no more than 1 page long. After our executive summary, we will finally arrive at the body of the report. Here, within the body, we will discuss the report's content and analyze the problem that the report is trying to solve. The first section of the report will be a problem section. Within this section, we will first provide what the report examines and then present a bulleted list of either the central questions that the report seeks to answer or concise statements of the problems that the report examines. Providing this information clarifies the purpose of our report for our reader. Now that we have finished writing the report, it would be beneficial to return to the problem section to examine whether or not we have addressed the topics mentioned in these bullet points. If our report is properly structured, it should fulfill the purposes laid out in this section. After the problem section, we must provide some background information on our topic. Within our informal report, the first body paragraph was dedicated to providing the context surrounding the issue examined within the report. Here, within our formal report, the background section discusses similar information. The only difference is that the formal report deals with more complicated issues. Therefore, we should have multiple paragraphs within our background section. These paragraphs are differentiated through the use of first-level headings and second-level headings. After these paragraph sections, the author then moves on to the next major section of the report. From this point on, the sections of the report will differ depending upon your specific topic. Please note that if you are including a chart or figure within your report, there are two items we should be aware of. First, we should label it and provide the reference page citation after the word source. Keep in mind, we should still include this source within our references page, even though we are citing it here as well. Secondly, we always need to introduce charts and figures as well as analyze them. Here, within the paragraph itself, the author mentions the tables and the information they contain. Then, after presenting both of these tables, the author gives an analysis of what they actually discuss. Charts and figures are a form of evidence. Therefore, like the quotations or paraphrases we use within our paragraphs, they must be cited and analyzed and applied. This brings us to a review of how to properly incorporate paraphrases and quotations within our paragraphs. Here, within the Health Care Mandate section, we have two quotations. When we are revising and editing our use of evidence within a formal report, one of the first steps we should take is to analyze all of our quotations to see if direct quotations are actually needed, or if we could provide the important information more succinctly within a paraphrase. There are two guidelines that we should implement to decide if we should use a direct quote from a source or a paraphrase. First, we should use a direct quote if the original author is an authority on the subject. As many of our sources will be from peer-reviewed articles, the majority of our sources will fulfill this requirement. The second guideline for gauging whether we should implement a quotation is whether the original author has worded an idea more clearly and concisely than we could ourselves. With these guidelines in mind, let's take a look at the quotations implemented in this paragraph. As I read through the first quotation, consider whether or not it should remain a quotation or whether it could be paraphrased. In previous years, individuals were generally required to be enrolled in minimum essential health coverage or pay an excise tax. This quotation is worded very clearly and concisely. Therefore, it should probably remain a quote. Now let's read the second quotation. Ken Perez indicates that the repeal of the individual mandate in 2019 will increase the number of uninsured Americans, relative to a baseline that assumes continuation of cost-sharing reduction subsidies in the ACA marketplaces, by 4 million in 2019, with that figure growing to 13 million in 2025 and remaining at that level through 2027. This quotation is extremely long and fairly convoluted, indicating that we may want to paraphrase this information instead. Our inclination to paraphrase this information is confirmed when we read the analysis that is provided for this quotation. In the next sentence, the author of the report writes, "Some clients may see this as a reason to drop their health insurance immediately, but it is important for them to know this does not take effect until 2019. As we can see from this analysis, all that is important within the quotation is 1. That the individual mandate is being repealed, and 2. That many Americans will drop their insurance during 2019. The rest of the information is superfluous. Therefore, since we can more clearly and concisely convey the important information in our own words, we should switch this quotation to a paraphrase. Here, we have provided the necessary information from Perez within a paraphrase. By eliminating the quotation, we have condensed this sentence by 27 words. Ken Perez states that the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act's repeal of the individual mandate may prompt as many as 4 million people to drop their insurance in 2019. Not only does this paraphrase condense the original quote, but it also improves the clarity of our argument by eliminating needless information. Remember that when we are incorporating a paraphrase within our paragraphs, we must include a parenthetical citation to indicate where the paraphrase ends. We must also use the author's name or the website title directly within the sentence to indicate where the paraphrase begins. Here, we know that everything from Ken Perez to paragraph 5 is paraphrasing another author's ideas. Keep in mind that when we use the author's name or website title directly within the sentence, we must immediately follow it with the year of publication in parentheses. For quotations, however, it is possible to include all the parenthetical information at the end of the sentence, as has been done for the Adkins source. Because we are using a direct quote, our reader knows that everything within the quotation marks is coming from an outside source. With quotations, it is also important to note that we should never begin a sentence with quotation marks. We should always have what is called a lead-in. Here, the author begins the sentence with a prepositional phrase, and then provides the quotation. In the next paragraph, the author provides a long lead-in. After this lead-in, the author then begins the quotation. There are many ways to create lead-ins for our quotations. We merely need to ensure that we are not beginning our sentences with quotation marks. This child tax credit paragraph also provides us with a good example of a paragraph that needs some revision and editing. As we previously discussed, we should begin our paragraphs with strong specific topic sentences. Here, we have a very strong specific topic sentence. We should then provide our evidence, which is also done appropriately. Once we provide evidence, we then need to analyze and apply that evidence to our specific situation. Within this paragraph, however, the analysis and application step has not been taken. Instead, the author immediately delves into more research. This error will need to be revised. After our first piece of evidence, we need to insert analysis and application, as well as a transition to our second piece of evidence. Since our first quotation is examining how the child tax credit has been increased, we need to analyze how this increase will affect H&R Block's clients. Something along the following lines would be appropriate. Given the elimination of exemptions, this increase in the child tax credit will help offset some of the added tax liability for large families. This sentence analyzes the evidence that was provided and explains its importance to H&R Block. In addition to analyzing and applying our evidence, we also need to transition to our next piece of evidence. Within this paragraph, the author proceeds to a discussion of how even wealthy families can now claim the child tax credit. Therefore, we need to insert a sentence that transitions our reader from larger families being able to recoup the loss of exemptions to wealthier individuals being able now to claim the credit. This transition can be accomplished by inserting a transitional sentence after our analysis. However, larger families are not the only ones to benefit from changes to the child tax credit. This sentence ushers the reader from the analysis of our first piece of evidence to the introduction of our second piece of evidence. The author then provides the second piece of evidence and analyzes it while concluding the paragraph. Once we have revised the content of our paragraph, we should check to ensure that our paragraph is no more than 12 lines of text long. When we have revised all the content of all of our paragraphs, we should then begin editing them. One of the most important elements of editing a formal report is to look for informal or inappropriate word choices. It is hard to garner credibility with our reader if we are using unprofessional words. Within this paragraph, there are two instances of unprofessional wording: boost and revamped. These words have more professional synonyms that could be used. When examining the use of revamped, we will find that it is difficult to find an alternative that sounds professional given the current sentence structure. In order to improve the formality of this sentence, we will change the words "details the revamped credit and says" to "outlines the credit's changes." Not only is this wording more professional, it is also more concise than the original. By including a colon after changes, this sentence still functions as a lead-in and appropriately introduces the quotation. A similar change can be made to "given a boost," which is also too informal. These three words can be replaced with one word: increased. Often, informal wording is also wordy wording. After we have eliminated all unprofessional words, we should then examine our writing for wordy phrases. Phrases like "a number of," "afford an opportunity," "due to the fact," and countless others make our writing more convoluted than it needs to be. Before submitting a report, we should examine the document for wordy phrases. You can find lists of wordy phrases online and then use the Control F function in Word to see if they appear within the document. By examining our paragraphs for unprofessional words and wordy phrases, we can not only improve our credibility as writers, but also make our wording more direct and concise. This then brings us to the recommendation and conclusion section of our report. Remember, while the analysis provided within the body paragraphs is vital, the ultimate purpose of the report is to provide clear findings or recommendations. For a formal report, the recommendation section will more than likely be multiple paragraphs. If the findings were obvious or if there were an easy solution, we would not be writing a formal report on the topic. Therefore, be sure that you have given due diligence to this final section of your report by providing specific and applicable direction for the company. Once the reader has finished reading these paragraphs, he or she should have a clear understanding of how the business should proceed regarding the issue. Finally, once we have provided our recommendation and conclusions, we will then end the report with our references page. Remember that our sources must be cited by two methods. First, we must include them within a reference page, as is seen here. Secondly, we must cite our sources through parenthetical citations within our body paragraphs. As we revise and edit our report, we should make sure that all the sources cited within the paragraphs of the report are cited within the references page. Similarly, only sources that have been used within the report should appear within the references page. Or in other words, we should not have a reference page citation unless there is an in-text citation to which it correlates. As far as formatting, the references should begin on their own page. Additionally, our references should be in alphabetical order by the first author's last name, or by the article title or web page title if no author is provided. We should also be sure that our entries are single-spaced and that there is a double space between our entries. Each entry should also have hanging indents for the second and subsequent lines. For more information about creating a references page or citing sources within the report itself, please review the Research and Citation lecture. Remember, plagiarism is a serious offense. Make sure that you are accurately citing and paraphrasing all the information that you are taking from outside sources. While we may feel like the report is nearing completion, We must remember that the revision and editing stage of the writing process comprises 50% of the work associated with creating a polished business document. In order to ensure that the document we are producing is applicable, reliable, and well written, we must spend time and effort revising and editing our report.